Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to 9 Weeks, an unofficial NESCAC Football Podcast. Week 4 is now behind us as we get to the 5th episode of 9 Weeks, alongside Dave Bagatelle, Chris Grace with you, and we have a big show for you today. We have former Williams and Wesleyan head football coach Mike Whalen, current athletic director of the Cardinals. We have current Trinity Bantams signal caller Zander Zebrowski joining us as his Bantam team off to a great start as they look to defend their NESCAC championship. We will recap last week's games and bring you the power rankings and preview the games for this upcoming week of NESCAC football. But first, it is my pleasure to welcome in our first sponsor of 9 Weeks, a NESCAC Football Podcast, Game Day Sports. Transform your game day experience with Game Day Sports, your ultimate partner in celebrating athletic excellence. They specialize in collaborating with teams to elevate their presence and create memorable keepsakes for every fan and player. With over 25 years of experience working with NESCAC teams, trust Game Day Sports to bring your team's story to life in vibrant print materials, ensuring every game day is one to remember. So welcome, Game Day Sports, to 9 Weeks. We appreciate your support. Dave, if you look at the results from last week, nothing too crazy, but that would not be telling the whole story, because if you just checked it on the scoreboard with, I don't know, say 5 minutes left in the third quarter, some of those games, they looked a whole lot differently. What would you like to talk about first from what happened last week?
Your choice. You're the host, Chris. You get to pick.
So I think the first thing we need to talk about is the game of the week, which was Tufts and Trinity. I was doing a few other things. Tufts was hanging around. They were right there with Trinity. They actually held a lead, but then Trinity just found their rhythm, and the Bantams just brushed their teeth and reload. Some things changed, but everything remains the same in Hartford.
Tufts led the game at the half. Unbelievable. My sense is I thought it was going to be a close game. Looked up at the scoreboard. Obviously, I was up in Clinton, New York, and was following along that game. I then put it on my phone and was watching both games, and Trinity did what they've been doing all year. Teams stay close for a half, and then whatever adjustments Coach Devaney and his coaching staff make at halftime, they seem to be working, because the same sort of thing happened the week before with Williams. They come out in the second half and just ran Tufts right off the field. As I said, I watched the game. It was like two different teams were playing in the first half and the second half. Offensively, Tufts couldn't stop them. Great performance by a young man we're going to have on later, Zander Zebrowski. Another fantastic game by him. They seem to be clicking on all cylinders. I don't know what Coach Devaney can do to get them to play two halves of football, but if they ever play two halves of football, and maybe that's going to happen this week, if it does, they could score 60, 70 points. I think there's definitely that potential there.
In many ways, I think the narrative is the same narrative you hear in the NFL right now. People talk about the Kansas City Chiefs and say, oh, they've won all these Super Bowls and they're not playing great football. And you look up, they've got injured players and they're 5-0. You could say the same thing about Trinity. You look at Zebrowski's numbers from last game, 24 for 28, 294, 2 touchdowns through the air, carried the ball 15 times for 67 yards and a touchdown. We know about DiNapoli. He had 2 touchdowns on the ground. But then, and we know about the receiving core, Nolan O'Brien and Sean Clapp, Matt Laughlin, and DiNapoli obviously contributes through the air. It just looks like just as talented of a Trinity team as we've seen in the past. Certainly they have separated themselves, I think, at this point as the clear number 1 team in the NESCAC. And we'll talk about their game this week a little bit later on in the show. Real quick note, though, Mike Berluti played a great game for Tufts, 278 through the air, 3 touchdown passes. But it just wasn't enough as Trinity continues to do Trinity-like things. As we move forward, another game I thought that was an interesting matchup last week, Middlebury and Amherst. Middlebury has, after that big-time disappointing loss in week 1 against Wesleyan, they have continued to find ways to win games as they were able to hold off Amherst, a game that got much closer as it went on, 29-21. The Panthers now improved to 3-1, and they control their own destiny in the NESCAC season. So Middlebury continuing to play solid football.
Middlebury, they led 20-0 at the half. Amherst was not doing anything again offensively. Amherst made it the game. Obviously, they're very well coached. Coach Mills is one of the longer-term, better coaches in the NESCAC. He's had a lot of success. He's won NESCAC championships, won Little 3 titles. They're a little bit offensively challenged, but they still scored 21 points on Middlebury and frankly made this probably a little bit tighter of a game than the Panthers thought were going to happen in the second half. Middlebury, here they are, 4 games in, they're 3-1. Their only loss, of course, to Wesleyan on opening day, so they're on a little bit of a roll themselves. What we expected from Middlebury this year, to be honest with you, but they're pretty much where I thought they would be. They're right in the mix through 4 games, Chris.
Yeah, Middlebury's got a big game coming up this week as they will take on the Eves, and the Eves really controlled the second half. The narrative for Bowdoin is they have really struggled in second halves of games this year. The record could look a lot different, but another struggle in the second half for the Polar Bears as the Eves go into Maine and come away with the 34-14 victory, and they improved to 3-1.
Williams College is playing. We've had Coach Raymond on. I'm not surprised. He's got a really terrific sophomore quarterback in Owen McHugh. Their 5th year or 4th year, whatever year it is, running back Mario Fischetti from Long Island, I might add, had a huge day. 2 really long runs, had over 170 yards rushing on about 8 or 9 carries. He had a really great day. And the Williams offense, particularly the running attack, which Coach Raymond, when we had Coach Raymond on, he said they're going to try and run the ball. He's going to work by committee and working the quarterback and the tailbacks they have. That seems to be working really well for them. In this game, their defense played well. And we've said it before with Bowdoin, by the way. They play that high pressure. I feel funny saying all gas, no break with no more Robert Saleh in the NFL, but they play that high pressure defense. And I feel instead of wearing down the opponents, they get a lot of sacks and they get a lot of interceptions, but it's risk reward. And I think they wear down their players, and it seems to affect them in the second half a lot. And you saw that in the game against Williams.
Yeah, quick shout out to Coy Price, a former guest of our podcast, had a 15-yard fumble recovery for a touchdown. It's a game that was tied at 7 at halftime, but Williams completely dominated the second half, outscoring Bowdoin to 7 in the second half. And you mentioned Mario Fischetti. He had a 68-yard touchdown run and an 80-yard touchdown run in this one. So Williams continuing to play really good football. Their only setback was on the road against Trinity.
And Fischetti's always been a really great player. His issue during his career at Williams has been injuries. This is his 4th year playing, and I think he's only played 1 full season. He's gotten hurt the last couple of years, hasn't played more than 4 games in a year. So if he can stay healthy for the whole year, he can definitely do some damage in this league. Remains to be seen whether he can, but I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, and then probably the most entertaining game of the week was the first BBC game of the year, and the hardest thing to do for a program when they're trying to build their program. We talked to head coach Matt Coyne about this last week, is what do you do the next week? And he knew it was going to be a challenge, and Bates and Colby battled throughout the evening in Maine, and it ended up being a 26-28 victory for Colby. Bates scored with 1:54 seconds left, but could not convert the 2-point conversion, and that was the final score line. So really a matter of feet really determined this one, but a big win for Colby as they have been knocking on the door and finally came away with a big victory.
Yeah, and first of all, out of respect to our friends up in Maine, thank you for watching up there in the North Country. It's the CBB, Chris, not the BBC.
I was thinking about, that's really funny. Oh my God, don't mind it. Full disclosure, it's 10:30 at night and I have a chin roll.
No, so I just wanted to play this straight.
Yeah, I was thinking fair and balanced, so I was thinking BBC.
There you go. But yeah, it was really because that was a night game up in Waterville. I was able to watch the complete game end to end on the drive back from Clinton. And it was really an entertaining game. I have to tell you, it was back and forth the whole night. The two teams combined for, I think, over 500 yards rushing. I was surprised. I thought this was going to be more of a defensive battle between these two teams. I knew it was going to be a close game because the teams, just the way they matched up, I thought it was going to be a very low-scoring game, 14-13, 14-10, something like that. So the fact there was a lot of offense, in fact, the Colby quarterback had a career day. He was NESCAC Offensive Player of the Week. He had a hell of a game. The Colby running back, who's been a player there for a long time, had a big day. He's been a very good player in this league for a long time. And look, Colby clearly has some athletes on both sides of the football. They have a lot of size. They've been in the games this year, and they're 1-3, but they're a very good 1-3 if there is such a thing. We're going to talk about the games later, but I think Wesleyan's going to have their hands full with Colby this week as they come to Middletown to face the Cardinals.
Yeah, speaking of Wesleyan, the Cardinals headed to Clinton, New York to take on Hamilton, and coming off a very disappointing home defeat to Bates. Through three quarters, it was not looking good for Wesleyan. Nico Candido made some plays in the fourth quarter, and the Cardinals were able to make some plays on defense, and they were able to escape Clinton with a victory. But through three quarters, it did not look as though it was going to be a great day in the sun for Wesleyan. There were a few critical plays in this game, but I think, not to take away from the narrative, you look at Nico Candido's numbers, 20 for 27, 291, 2 touchdowns, both to Chase Wilson, who continues to have a great year receiving for Wesleyan. But I have to say, full disclosure, as the neutral on this podcast, the Cardinals may have won the game anyway, but the go-ahead touchdown was one of the more shockingly negligent officiating calls I've seen in a very long time. Nonetheless, the Cardinals defense played effective and made the plays when they needed to. But for those who aren't aware, the go-ahead touchdown, there was a third down play for Hamilton and a tie score in the fourth quarter, and they threw a little bubble screen, and it might have been a lateral, it might have been a forward pass. That's for debate. The officials ruled it a lateral, and then interestingly enough, for Wesleyan, Aiden Nelson, their slot corner, came in and recovered the fumble, and he dove on the football and then popped up and ran with it. But in college, of course, you can't do that. But none of the officials on the field noticed, and he ran in for a 49-yard touchdown. So I'm sure that the Hamilton coaching staff has let their feelings be known. But a break for Wesleyan, but you have to make your own breaks, and the Cardinals will be happy to come away with a victory.
I was at the game. That was one of a number of, that was the most egregious call, but there were a number of other really not great calls throughout the day going both ways. And the one thing I don't like to talk about officiating. Neither of us do. I know that we've had this conversation before. When it's that egregious, as you said, that it impacts the game. And in this case, these officials, unfortunately, did impact the game. These student athletes, they're working hard. Coaches are working hard, and I hate to see the game really decided because of the officiating. So it's just unfortunate. Like you said, Wesleyan might have won. Worst case, they have the ball there. They had some momentum at that point. I will say this, Wesleyan's defense just played off the charts. They gave up one touchdown. After that, they completely locked down Hamilton's offense. They really couldn't get really much of anything going. They were in their backfield all day. It was really a great job by the Wesleyan. And the Wesleyan defense, generally this year, except for a few really long plays, other than that, they played really well. They're one of the top defenses in the league. You play good defense, it'll keep you in games. And that's really what they did. They kept themselves in the game. And I think Chase Wilson, I bet he wishes he could play every week against Hamilton because last year he had 4 touchdowns against them. This year he had 2 touchdowns. Of course, Chase is having a heck of a year. He leads the NESCAC in yards receiving, leads the NESCAC in reception touchdowns. He's in a league that has a lot of good receivers. He's clearly one of, if not the best receivers in the league.
Yeah, and I want to give full credit to Hamilton, too, because they really kept Chase bottled up throughout most of this game. It wasn't until the fourth quarter that he was really able to stamp his presence on this one. That's the hard thing about, we talked to Coach Whalen, and you'll hear our interview with him. But one of the tough things about building a program, one of the things that Hamilton and Bates and some of the programs that have struggled for the last few years are realizing is you can do a lot of things really well, but you have to play for 4 quarters and you have to play clean football. And just watching that game, whether it was a lateral or not, whether it should have been called a touchdown or not, Hamilton was unable to finish the game the way that they played for the first 3 quarters. And that's the nature of the biz, right? You're going to get a big victory. You look at that Bates victory over Wesleyan 2 weeks ago. Bates finished that game and they made plays when they had to. And that's how you come away with an upset. And Hamilton had the football up by 7 late in the 3rd quarter. They had the football in Wesleyan territory in the 4th quarter in a tie game. The Cardinals got stops and scored touchdowns when they had their opportunities. So full credit to Coach DeCenzo and the Cardinals. It hasn't been pretty over the last 2 weeks for Wesleyan, but they still control. They're the only team other than Trinity and Middlebury that completely control their own destiny at this point.
Yeah, I do want to give a shout out to 2 individual players in this game. First of all, Dylan Connors from West Milford, New Jersey, I might add. I'm impartial except when it comes to New Jersey as Chris. And he was a student athlete I helped recruit, and great to see the success he's having. He had 9 tackles in the game.
Yeah, he's just everywhere. He flies all over the football.
2 tackles for loss, a sack, and he was selected as NESCAC Defensive Player of the Week. So big shout out to him. And then the other thing that was just super impressive to me, and I think he's the real deal, is the punter for Hamilton, Ty Hoey. He averaged 47 yards a punt. He put numerous punts inside 20, several punts over 50 yards. I don't know what it takes to be a punter at the next level, but with the year he's having, and you give him some real NFL level coaching, he's scary good. I've never really seen a punter like that in the NESCAC in all the years I've been watching NESCAC football. Big shout out to him, one of the better players on the Hamilton Continental team.
As we wrap up our recap of last week and we take a quick look at the NESCAC standings, Trinity at 4-0, and then you've got Middlebury, Wesleyan, and Williams all at 3-1, Amherst, Tufts at 2-2, and then Bates, Bowdoin, and Colby at 1-3, and Hamilton still looking for their first victory of the year. There is some separation. We talked about this. We get to week 3, week 4, week 5, you're starting to see some separation. But what I think is really exciting, Dave, is that you look at the top half of the NESCAC, and a lot of those teams still have to play each other. So still a lot to be determined. It might not be determined this week per se, but a lot of big games left on the schedule. And that's what you hope for, right? You want big games as we get into late October, early November. And I think that's what we're going to see. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, every week, that's the great thing about the NESCAC, 9 weeks. You start getting it as part of the season, and basically every week there's a playoff game. There's 1 or 2 games that are almost knockout games at this point. And I 100% agree with you. Trinity, in my mind, has clearly separated themselves. They're undefeated. Right now, they are the clear number 1 in the league. And then you've got a number of other teams that are in the mix at this point.
Yeah, we'll touch on that as we give you Dave's power rankings and we preview the games for week 5, and we'll do that for you right after this. You are watching/listening to 9 Weeks, an official NESCAC football podcast with Chris and Dave. Back with more right after this. Welcome back to 9 Weeks, an official NESCAC football podcast alongside Dave Bagatelle, Chris Grace back with you. It's our pleasure to welcome in former Williams and Wesleyan head football coach, current athletic director of the Wesleyan Cardinals, and Sneak Attack, my broadcast partner for Wesleyan football games, Mike Whalen. Wales, great to have you with us. We're pumped that we could get you on the show. We've got so much to talk to you about. But first things first, with someone who's been around the league for now, let's see, over, I don't want to age you here, but we're talking 40 years. It's got to be pretty cool for you to see just where the NESCAC is right now compared to where it was when you were a player, and just how competitive this league is, not just in football, but in all sports. It's really turned into the preeminent Division III sports conference. It's got to make you feel pretty proud.
No, it definitely does, Chris. And first of all, great to be with you guys. Big fan of the broadcast, and I think you guys are doing a great job. And Chris, you're doing a great job trying to convert Dave to being neutral. So keep going on that. But to your point, Chris, I think that the story I love to tell is that when the presidents and NESCAC presidents were trying to make their decision on whether they were going to allow the NESCAC teams. They were already allowing the individuals, meaning I was a wrestler. If I qualified for the nationals, I could go to the nationals. But teams weren't able to qualify for NCAA play. Although I wasn't in the NESCAC at the time, I was just about ready to come back as a coach in the NESCAC. I did get the story when I did arrive back when in 1993-94 was when the first year when the presidents decided. And apparently in the discussion with the presidents, there was a couple of presidents that basically came to the conclusion of, all right, let's go ahead and let the teams go as well. Probably in the long run, it's the right thing to do. And hey, what are the chances that they're going to advance? What are the chances they're going to have any success on the national level? And that was really their thought process. Like, they were like, hey, it was like, be careful what you wish for. You want to try to go compete on the national level? Yeah, good luck. And I don't think any of them had any confidence that the teams would perform at the level that they did. And certainly from a Wesleyan perspective, one of the things we're proud of is that first year, our baseball team made it to the College World Series. And that was just the first of many teams, obviously, that have won national championships, Final Fours. Just the NESCAC is dominant, and it's a tremendous league to be associated with.
Yeah, and I know that your journey right now, obviously, people think of you as being affiliated with Wesleyan. A big part of your story is your history at Williams. So talk to people as someone who's a Wesleyan Cardinal. How did you end up at a little 3 rival? How did you end up at Williams? Something I've always wanted to ask you, but really don't know the answer. I know your Williams story, but I don't know how you got to Williams.
Yeah, so it's a good story. So I was at Colgate. It was in my 3rd year at Colgate as the associate head coach in football. And unfortunately, we didn't win enough games and got let go. By the way, there's an old saying that says there's 2 kinds of coaches, those that have been fired and those that are going to get fired. It's a baptism that you get fired. And that was my baptism. And we had just had our 2nd child, and Karen was working at Colgate in Missions, and I was home in the Mr. Mom role. That was a great movie, by the way. Mr. Mom is a great movie. Michael Keaton. For all those out there, if you haven't seen it, find it. It's a great movie. That being said, it was one of those hiring seasons that there was just no jobs, no college jobs on the East Coast. We really just didn't want to relocate far away, Midwest, South. We wanted to stay in New England if we could. I started looking at even some high school jobs and really wasn't sure what I was going to do. I got a call from a Wesleyan guy, Dave Barnard, who was the head baseball coach assistant football coach at Williams. And he said, hey, we're looking for a head wrestling assistant football job. It's going to be posted. And Coach Farley was asking me, he asked me to give you a call and see if you might be interested in it. And at that point, I was like, yeah, I'm sure I'm interested, because come June 30th, I'm not going to get another paycheck from Colgate, so I need to figure this out. And long story short, went over there, talked with Coach Farley. And even though I hadn't coached wrestling since my days at Springfield in grad school, they hired me as the head wrestling coach and assistant football coach. And I did that for 9 years. And then Coach Farley retired, and I was fortunate enough to get that football job and finish the rest of my 15-year tenure at Williams as the head football coach.
Or where I'm going to head next. And it was a happy day for all of us at Wesleyan when you made the move back to your alma mater. By the way, Wales and I have known each other for, I'm going to make you feel really old, 42 years. You were one of my mentors when I came in as a freshman, and been friends ever since, even when you wore purple. We congratulated you on kicking our butt, and that was the end of that. But in 2010, you came back home, of course, and moved back to Middletown. I've heard the story a zillion times and lived the story, but I think it's obviously we don't have enough time for the full version, but if you could just give the annotated version, what that was like making the move back, and talk a little about what your success at Wesleyan.
Yeah, I think it was a very hard decision. We were fully ingrained in the Williamstown community, and Karen was assistant athletic director in charge of business at Williams, and we had just built a house, and both my sons one was a sophomore in high school, and my younger one was going into high school. And it's not an easy time to make a move, but at the end of the day, what it came down to for me was no matter what I did at Wesleyan, at Williams, And we had a lot of success during my time there, both as assistant coach and head coach. And I just felt that, rightly so, it was always going to be Dick Farley's program. He built it. I maintained it. One of the things that made it so hard to leave was I knew that the team we had coming back in 2010 was going to be very good. And I actually thought we could potentially get on a 2 or 3 year run. And that team ended up going undefeated, by the way. And
I think you told me that I could have coached that team and won.
yeah, there's
8 games.
It was definitely a talented team. But I felt that having the opportunity to come to Wesleyan and try to turn the football program around, and then it was predetermined that I would probably coach football for 5 years and then move into the athletic director role, which was something I was looking to do because I knew that, as Coach Farley taught me, that there was going to come a time when you weren't able to do the football job at the level. And even with all his success, he's arguably the most successful Division III football coach in the country ever. He still had that fear of not having the ending that he wanted to have with his career. That was something I picked up from him. So when this opportunity presented itself that I could go and coach football and had the challenge of turning the football program around and then take on a bigger challenge in terms of trying to change the entire culture of the Wesleyan Athletic Department. That was a challenge that it really appealed to me. Here we are 14 years later, and we're not where we want to be yet, but we've made a lot of progress.
So, well, speaking about transitioning from a coach to an athletic director, I think that's a natural transition for a lot of people. You're not the first person that's done something like that. I think of like Vince Dooley at the University of Georgia. It's the first name that pops into my head, but I know that was a traditional move, especially back in the day, even more. Can you just talk about what's been the most fulfilling thing for you role as someone who is built to lead, but has to lead a little bit, not from the back seat, but a little bit from the background, I guess would be the way I would look at it. You can't just tell coaches what to do, even though you might have opinions, but you have to subtly nudge them from time to time. Talk about kind of that adjustment.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Chris. It is an adjustment. There's no question about it. But I'll start by saying I miss coaching every single day. I miss different aspects of it. The one thing that I've really come to enjoy is playing the role sort of the GM. And what I mean by that is NESCAC jobs don't open very often, and head jobs. And when they do, it's an opportunity. And for me at Wesleyan, it's been an opportunity to really actively recruit and find talented candidates that could come and interview for the job, and then hopefully pick the right one to come in and help us turn the program around. And I think one of the things that's both helped me and also has been appealing to the people I've hired is the fact that I wasn't a lifelong administrator. When I talked to them about coming to Wesleyan, and I talked to them about turning around a program, so whether it's Mike Freed with tennis, whether it's Kim Williams with lacrosse, whether it's Ben Samara with volleyball, whether it's Christine Kemp with field hockey, I could talk to them from the perspective of this is going to be really hard. And they knew that I was telling them the truth, and I was telling them my experience. And I think that developed a level of trust that enabled them to feel comfortable coming to me, and because they knew that I'd been through what they are currently going through and came out the other side, and that I could help them and provide the support. My favorite phrase, and it's a cliche, it's trust the process. If you believe in yourself as a coach and you know what you're doing and you're willing to work and you have that passion, if you're at a place where you're supported and the school wants to strive for excellence, then if you just trust the process, you're going to come out the other side. Fortunately, we've had quite a few coaches do that at Wesleyan. So that's really been, I think, one of the most appealing parts of my job.
So you've obviously had a lot of great moments, a lot of great success individually, as teams, as programs. Is there one thing that you could say you're most proud of?
Yeah, again, from my personal perspective, I will say that during those first 2 years, after coming back to Wesleyan and taking over the football program, there were several times during those first 2 years that I woke up in the middle of the night in a full sweat saying, what the hell did I do? Like, why did I leave Williams? And I think that with the support of my wife and my family and my colleagues at work, that it was a situation where I learned a lot about myself, and that it was a truly rewarding experience. And I can still remember, that 2013 season when we won Melville 3. That was something that hadn't been done in 43 years. And it was special. And then obviously winning the first team national championship, men's lacrosse in 2018, and to follow that up with a women's tennis national championship in 2019, and then to have the men's crew win the IRA national championship last year. Those are all outstanding memories. And, knowing that just being able to take a step back and just look at the culture of Wesleyan athletics as a whole and how it's evolved, and the student athletes that we have today, and that the ones that have graduated during this period of time where we've had some success, seeing them come back now, and not just in football, but in other sports where they're so proud to be associated with the programs. And I think that's the piece that until you experience that firsthand, and it was almost like something we took for granted at Williams because success happened all the time. It was so frequent there across the board, and it was taken for granted. And now to be in a place that for so many, programs, you're doing things for the first time, maybe in the history of the program, is really special. And to be able to hire really talented coaches that are very passionate about what they do, and to be there with them to help them, get over the hump in their program and establish their programs, both as top teams in the NESCAC and then on a national level, that's very rewarding.
This is the last one I got for you, Coach. I know we're up against it. And you can answer honestly, or you can be politically correct. It doesn't matter. But if I say to you right now, answer honestly, more rewarding for you, and I don't know the answer, so I'm curious, the accomplishments as a football coach or a wrestling coach, or seeing some of the programs that you have seen start from ground zero and where they are now on a national level, what has been more rewarding for you when you look back at your legacy? Are you going to say, I am more proud, and your legacy is not over as the athletic director at Wesleyan, obviously, but seemingly your legacy is complete as a head football coach, unless you decide that you're going to come back, and that's cool. I'll just look for a new broadcast partner.
That's fine.
No, just some who would love to do better. But no, in all honesty, what will you say looking back you're most proud of?
That's a great question. I guess because I spent 40 years or 35 years as a football coach, that the accomplishments of being a head football coach, I think probably because no matter what I do as an athletic director, I'm a support person. You know what I mean? And that's the reality of it. And again, I'm not sitting here saying that the only reason that John Raber won a national championship or Mike Freed won a national championship is because of Mike Whalen. That's not the case. And there's just a little bit more ownership from the football career because I coached it for so many years. When I introduce myself to student athletes, I don't say AD Whalen, I say Coach Whalen.
That's it.
Because I consider myself a coach. I think at the end of the day I'll always be coach. And I think that I'm extremely proud of Wesleyan athletics and where the program is today. And I hope that we'll continue to build on this legacy and keep things going forward.
Awesome. That's awesome. I just want to say we didn't talk a lot about your family. You're a great dad and you're a great friend. And I've been fortunate to get to know you over all these years. And definitely we appreciate you. Turn it back to Chris to wrap it up. But thanks for coming on. Really do appreciate that, Coach.
Thanks. And I just want to say to you guys that I think this is a great thing. And I think in year one, that it's probably hard for people to look at this as a balanced NESCAC podcast, but I think you guys are doing a great job. I think as folks really get to know you both better, they will see that you're fair and balanced. They will see that the objective here is to promote the NESCAC, and it is a great conference. And I think this year in itself is just look at the scores. Every week is a dogfight now. There's no more gimmies, and that's great. And that's really what, as a conference, that's what you want. I think there's a lot of people that, because football doesn't go to the NCAA championships, and that's a whole other that I can come back and do a whole another hour podcast.
We got to get clearance for that.
Right.
We're going to get the commissioner on first, and then we'll have you on.
Okay.
Right.
But that being said, I think that there's probably a tendency for people to think that NESCAC football is not as strong as NESCAC lacrosse or NESCAC field hockey or some of the other great sports that NESCAC has. There's so many of them. But I really believe that, especially if folks out there really look at some of our players from Wesleyan, from Tufts, from other schools that have had the opportunity to go and play up with their COVID eligibility, the talent level in this league is really good. And I'm excited for that. And I'm excited to see this conference as it moves forward in football, because I think it's a great group of coaches out there. It's a high level of coaching. When Chris and I broadcast our games, I really take a lot of pride in not just giving the Wesleyan perspective, but trying to give, the overall perspective as a coach. And I do that with the premise that I want people out there to know how fortunate the NESCAC is to have so many great coaches in this conference and so many great coaches who have stayed in this conference for a long time. Be confident, be supportive, and know that week in and week out, the NESCAC's putting a good product out there in football.
Absolutely. We once again want to thank Coach Mike Whalen for joining 9 weeks in NESCAC Football Podcast. We've got another great interview coming up, representing, we're not going to tell you who, but representing maybe the team that's unbeaten in the NESCAC. I don't know, but we'll have that for you after this. It's 9 weeks in NESCAC Podcast. Welcome back to 9 weeks, an unofficial NESCAC Football Podcast, along with Dave Bagatelle, Chris Grace back with you. And we are very pleased to welcome in the signal caller of the unbeaten, reigning NESCAC co-champion, Trinity College Bantams, Zander Zebrowski, coming off of a big performance, 24 of 28, and a come-from-behind victory on the road in Medford, as the Bantams remain the only unbeaten team in NESCAC play, controlling their destiny as they are 4 weeks into their schedule. Zander, welcome to the show. We're pumped to have you with us, and I've got a lot to talk to you about. But first things first, I know you've waited a long time to be the guy. Talk about your experience working your way into the role of being the leader of a football team and what the first 4 weeks have looked like for you at Trinity this season.
Yeah, first off, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's funny. I've been asked this a couple times from friends, former teammates and stuff. I actually didn't start till my senior year in high school as well. I had to wait. I played like freshman high school football. I played JV football, but I didn't start varsity until my senior year. I started at cornerback my junior year, which is funny. I was the backup quarterback my junior year, but obviously I was behind a guy that's going to go down as one of the best quarterbacks in NESCAC history, Spencer Fetter, who I keep in touch with all the time. I text him, call him before games and stuff. So it was a tough situation, but I did the best I could in that situation, just getting mental reps on the sideline during games, practicing hard, and obviously focusing on other stuff in my life as well, like working hard in school, focusing on the afterlife of college, my job. And obviously I'm here as a 5th year. First 4 weeks, I think, so we had Colby to open up, and they were a good team. Their defense played hard. They were big up front. We won 17-7. I think we could have put up more points against them. We got stuck in the red zone a couple times. And then we had Bates on the road. Bates obviously beating Wesleyan was a surprise to all of us. They were pretty tough. They played hard. But and then Williams, and then obviously Tufts, and then we put up combined 84 points in those 2 games, and we really are rolling now. I'm pretty confident going in the rest of the season. Obviously, we have Hamilton this week, who have been struggling so far, but we got to keep the foot on the gas and keep it rolling.
Not to jump on Dave's toes here, looking at those last 2 games, it looked like in both cases you guys got off to slow starts and then found your rhythm in the second half and went on big time runs. Put your finger on the pulse. Like, what was the difference in those games? What do you think was the big key to getting everything rolling?
Yeah, I think especially in that Williams game, we went down 14-0 pretty quick. I think just settling in and having that mindset, we're going to get off to a fast start. Obviously, Coach Devaney talked to us after that Williams game going into the Tufts game. We wanted to get off to a faster start, both on offense and defense. Offensively, we scored on the first drive. I think we ended up scoring the second quarter again. But I think that's really what we're focusing on going into the rest of the season, is getting off to faster starts, because as we go into some tougher games later on in the season, we got to get off to a fast start, because playing from behind is not what you want, and it could cost you at the end. But I think against Williams and Tufts, just keeping the guys composed and having that mindset, we're going to be okay. Let's not panic here. that we can get out of this. And obviously we did in both games.
Full disclosure, you talked about not starting at quarterback until your senior in high school. You did go to Seton Hall Prep, which is one of the top high school football programs in New Jersey. So just want everybody to, it wasn't like you were playing at some slouch. It's the Trinity College of New Jersey high school football, Seton Hall Prep. But Zander, he came into the starting role. Everything that everybody had been talking about coming into the season was he's a little bit more of a running quarterback. He's going to be running around. It's going to be a little bit different than when Spencer was at quarterback. And yet here you are, you're completing passes at about an 80% clip. You don't have an interception. I think you got 10 touchdown passes. You're not running all that much. So it seems like just take out Spencer, put in Zander, and it's off we go. It seems like the same thing. Have they changed the offense at all? Is it pretty much the same thing they're running with Spencer? Have things changed at all? Or did we have your reputation down as being a runner? What's that all about?
No, yeah, I think in terms of the change in there wasn't really a huge change in the offense. Spencer Fetter had last season, especially through 31 touchdowns. But yeah, I would say it changed a little bit, the option to keep it for me a little more on certain run plays, and then a little bit more Q run straight up calls for me, especially against that Tufts. I think I ended up having 15 carries in that Tufts game. A few of them were on scrambles, but there was probably 7 or 8 call runs for me. But yeah, I think having that other option for that quarterback to run, not only just sit back in the pocket, it keeps defenses on their toes for sure.
Can you speak to what it's like? Obviously, you've had the patience of waiting for your time to shine, but when you do get that moment, that you're surrounded by such talented skill players that you can not try to do too much and let it all come to you. And I'm sure part of that is a reflection of your experience and being inside the program and knowing, but I'm sure it would have been easy for you to go out there in the first week and really force the issue. And as Dave pointed out, you're taking great care of the football. So talk about that, like trying to not do too much, knowing what's around you, but also like you've been so patient. It has to have been a little bit of a challenge for you from the start to not try to do too much and try to be like, hey, Spencer, I could do this. I can do this too.
I think for me, being the backup for my first 3 years here, obviously my freshman year, we didn't have a season. I never worked with the first team. I was always with the second team. So I never really got to throw with kind of the best receivers, the guys on the team. And now, and this is what our team preaches and what our coaches preach, we go against one of the best, if not the best defense in the league every week in practice. So just knowing that in the back of my mind, going every game that I've gone against one of the best defenses, if not the best defense we're going to see all season, every day in practice gives me that confidence that I don't have to do too much, that if, something's not there, I can just check it down to the running back. We have 2. DiNapoli's obviously one of the best running backs in the league. And now we have Jack Tassoni, who's been playing really well too. And he's only a sophomore. And yeah, just having that confidence. Obviously we have receivers like Sean Clapp, Nolan O'Brien, who have been having great seasons. And Matt Laughlin is also was one of the best, I would say one of the best receivers in the league. But yeah, just having that confidence to go into every game, knowing that I've been practicing against the best of the best, just allows me to just play my game.
Yeah, it's been a great year. My sense of the team is a lot of new players on defense, right? A couple of new guys in the offensive line, and just keeps on rolling. I feel like my perception, just watching you guys really closely and having watched a couple of your games so far, as the season progresses, you guys are getting better and better. And does it feel that way in practice? Does it feel that way during the games?
Yeah, definitely. I think I think that Williams week, kind of Colby and Bates were not wake-up calls, but it just opened our eyes. Like we have Williams this week, and then we have Tufts. We have 2 really tough games coming up. So I made sure the guys were really locked in all week in practice. While I was throwing routes after practice, we had extra film sessions after practice, 1 day a week, every week with full offense. And yeah, ever since that kind of second half of that Williams game, I feel like the momentum has just been building and building. We carried it in right into the Tufts game, and then we're having a great week of practice this week, and I'm really excited for the rest of the season.
So this is the last one I have for you. Obviously, since you've been affiliated with the program, you guys have had a lot of success. But one thing you weren't able to do last year is have an unbeaten season. So I'm sure just knowing the Trinity program, knowing Coach Devaney, knowing the kind of guys you've had in the past, I imagine that doesn't go unnoticed. That's got to be a clear goal. but how important is it for you personally to go unbeaten, unblemished, no questions asked? Is that something that's really going to define your season?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that we want to know every week. I think going 9-0 is always in the back of our minds, but you can't go 9-0 if we don't go 5-0 this week against Hamilton.
Good answer.
I think really preaching that to the guys, because the standard here is 9-0. You got to win 1 week at a time and be patient. And if you get to that last week against the Cardinals and you're 8-0 and you end up winning and 9-0, we accomplished our goal. So.
Very good. So I know Dave's got the segment that we like. This is obviously 9 weeks, a NESCAC Football Podcast. There's 9 games. There's 9 chances to win. We're pumped that we have a new sponsor this week. And for this version of 9 weeks of NESCAC, it is sponsored by Game Day Sports, your ultimate partner in celebrating athletic excellence, specializing in collaborating with teams to elevate their presence and create memorable keepsakes for every fan and player. With over 25 years of experience working with NESCAC teams, trust Game Day Sports to bring your team's story to life in vibrant print materials. Ensuring every game day is one to remember. Dave, 9 weeks, 9 questions. Hit him up.
All right, we ready, Zander?
Ready to go.
All right. What's your major?
So my major was political science undergrad. I'm in the public policy program, but I already have my job lined up. I'm going into finance starting in January, right after the season. So
I know a guy who could get you a better job in finance if you drop a game in week 9. Sorry.
Chris, this is an impartial podcast. Come on.
Yeah, there's a neutral. Unofficial. It's neutral.
Yeah, that was one of my questions. What are you going to be doing after your football career is over?
Yeah, so I'm going to JP Morgan. I'm working in the private bank for them.
Awesome. That's great. Where are you going to be in the New York metro area somewhere?
Yeah, I'm going to be in the Summit, New Jersey office.
Wow. I actually have a friend in that office, so we'll talk offline. We'll make an intro. You may already have met him, so it's awesome. Great. Congratulations on that. When you were an undergrad, what was your favorite class or in graduate school?
Yeah, favorite class. I would say my senior seminar was pretty interesting. There's a political science major, war, peace, and strategy with everything going on in Russia and Ukraine. And then because he did a good job of also tying that into the markets and how that kind of affected things that were going on in the U.S. I feel like that was my favorite class, was my senior seminar.
Awesome. And so if you didn't attend Trinity, where would you have gone to school?
Ooh, good question. So I did get recruited from a few of the NESCACs. I didn't go to Trinity, probably Union. I got recruited by Union. My high school football coach, head coach went there. I was between Union and Trinity. That's what it came down to for me.
Good answer. My dad and 2 sisters both went to Union College, so it's a good one.
Really? Nice.
Who's your role model, Zander?
Role model. I would say my dad. He actually he went to Verona High School and then played football and tennis at Colgate. Awesome. Yeah, he was also a quarterback as well. And he wore 15. I wear 15. I wear that for him. But yeah, I would say he's my role model in everything that I do, whether it's sports, in school, how I am as a person. I really look up to him in a lot of aspects of my life. So
I wonder if he was a quarterback when Coach Whalen got fired from Colgate bags.
I don't know. What year did your dad graduate?
86.
Okay. Right in the mix, right?
Same year as me. Who's your favorite pro football team?
I'm a Patriots guy.
All right, so that's the end of our interview, and we will.
How did that happen? You live in New Jersey and you're a Patriots fan?
I get the same response every time. Yeah. I grew up loving Tom Brady. I fell in love watching him as a kid, and I stuck with him. I'm not going to hop on to another.
I respect your loyalty, but that's about it.
What's your favorite food?
You're a Jersey guy. Nothing beats a Taylor ham, egg, and cheese on an everything bagel.
Love that. It's got to be Taylor ham, not pork roll.
Who says pork roll?
Exactly. Right. Okay. So what should we look for? You guys are playing Hamilton at home. You're back home in the coop this week. You got Hamilton coming in. What should we look for this week?
Yeah, I think the main focus going into Saturday's game is fast start. I'm hoping to get on them early. Obviously, they haven't won yet, so they're pretty hungry to get one win. We're going to get on them early. I think we're going to open it up a little bit. And yeah, foot on the gas the whole game, and hopefully we can coast in the second half. But obviously, we got to get it done in the first half. So
awesome. Last question for me. What does Zander like to do in his free time when he's not focused on class or football or getting ready for JP Morgan?
In my free time, I'm actually studying for like my securities exams, but I wouldn't say
There you go.
I'd like to do that right now. Probably just, I'm a huge fan of the Pat McAfee show. So I love watching that in my free time. Every day for lunch, I'll make myself lunch and then I'll watch the Pat McAfee show. And yeah, just hang out with my roommate. That's about it.
Who is your roommate?
Luca Delantolati. He's the outside linebacker DN for us.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Back to you, Chris. It's 9 questions, 9 weeks.
That's it. Look, Zander, we appreciate you taking some time. Obviously, we wish you the best of luck. We look forward to following the rest of your final season in Hartford. And like we've said from the get-go, we appreciate spreading the word about all teams, all things NESCAC. So we're pumped that you were able to join us. And I know you've got 4 weeks down, but you've still got some big games left on your schedule. And we look forward to seeing what happens the rest of the way. So best of luck for you, your Bantams team, and of course, your future beyond football. So thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Zander. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Appreciate
Thanks for having me.
That
Appreciate
is-
you. Thank
That
you.
is Trinity Bantam signal caller Zander Zebrowski as he leads the 4-0 Bantams as they will entertain the Hamilton Continentals this week in Hartford. We'll be back with more 9 weeks in NESCAC Football Podcast right after this. Welcome back to 9 weeks in NESCAC Football Podcast alongside Dave Bagatelle. Chris Grace back with you. Dave, we've touched on this a little bit throughout. We look at the power rankings, and I think through 3 weeks, we felt like the hierarchy was starting to establish itself. And now it seems like Trinity has really separated themselves with a clear, unanimous number 1 in the power rankings.
They completely control their own destiny. There's only one other team that has full control of their destiny, and that's going to be our number 2 team, which we're going to get to in a second. As I alluded to earlier, I still feel like Trinity hasn't played a complete game yet. I feel really bad for Hamilton if this is the week that happens because that game could get ugly in a hurry. They're playing better and better every week. They've got a ton of talent on the offensive side of the football. Obviously, new offensive line. They've given up already more sacks than they gave up all last year. They also have a different kind of quarterback back there who moves around a little bit more. The defense was young. A lot of new starters, but they're just starting to get their sea legs under them. So I feel like in Trinity's case, I almost feel like the best is yet to come. I think they're playing better and better. Obviously, they're well coached, and they're going to be tough to beat. If they're going to get beat, somebody's going to have to play their absolute best to beat them, and it's more than likely not going to be in the coop up on the campus of Trinity College.
So not to take too much time on this, but what movement did you have in your power rankings this week?
Yeah, so the big movement here was Tufts off of the loss. I thought that was going to be a much closer game, to be frank with you, and they kept it. They were winning at the half, as we talked about earlier. Trinity just ran them off the field in the second half. I have Tufts moving down from our 3rd spot down to 5. After Wesleyan at 2, we have, and there is a big drop between 1 and 2. There's no question. Trinity is the clear number 1. Our number 3 team is Middlebury. They moved up a spot. Williams moved up a spot off their convincing win against Bowdoin. Then we have Tufts at 5 and Colby off their first win. They're at 6. Probably the best of that mid-tier group. They've only won 1 game, but they've kept most of the other games close. They've been playing hard. I feel the teams that are ranked 6 through 9, you can basically throw in a hat, mix them up, and pick them out in any order. We have Colby at 6, Amherst, who's at 2 and 2. After they lost their 2nd straight game, they dropped to 7. They stay at 7, excuse me. Bowdoin drops from 6 to 8 after losing to Williams. Bowdoin, we've talked about it. They keep the games close for a half, but they just can't seem to finish out. A lot of really great individual players on defense. Their offense, they haven't really gotten much of a running game going, and it just, until we see them do a little bit more, we drop them in the rankings. Bates, they had the big win 2 weeks ago against Wesleyan. They played Colby hard. They lost by 2 points. They were 2-point conversion away from tying that game. They're at 1 and 3. I thought they would have a little bit of a letdown Thought they played well against Colby, just not enough. So they're at our number 9. And then the number 10th ranked team in the same spot, frankly, I think where they've been since the beginning of the season, is the only winless team in the NESCAC, Hamilton Continentals at 0-4.
So there's Dave's power rankings as we get ready for week 5 out of 9 on 9 weeks of NESCAC. All right, Dave, let's jump right into it. Games this week. I think when you talked about a couple of these teams, I think a sneaky game for this week is Bowdoin and Amherst. For Amherst, they took care of business early on, maybe against some of the lighter teams in their schedule. They've had some competitive games, but this is a sneaky good game as Bowdoin goes into Amherst. These are two teams that are going to be dominated, led by their defense. And the question is, can Bowdoin play 2 halves of football? And can Amherst find consistency on offense? I think it's just as simple as that. Who do you like in this game?
Probably the best unit on the field is going to be Amherst defense. My question is just, I know they scored 21 points against Middlebury, but they've really struggled this year. They have the 10th ranked offense in the league. They haven't been able to run the ball. They had really an atrocious game last week running the ball. Amherst is playing at home. They're going to be a slight favorite, but I'm going to go for the upset here, slight upset, and I'm going to go with the Bowdoin Polar Bears to finally play 60 minutes of football and come away with a very close win. I think they'll win by a field goal, some 3 or 4 points, something in that range.
So Bags going with a bold pick early. I like to see that. Exciting times here. Real quick, I know you're going to Trinity and Hamilton. I assume you're going with the Bantams with this one.
Yeah, if Hamilton actually shows up, I don't think this game is going to be, I think this game could be very ugly. We didn't talk to Zander about this, but he did get a lot of playing time in garbage time over the years. And I think whomever is Zander's backup this day, we're going to find out because he may get in the game awfully early in this one. If Trinity was going up to Hamilton, maybe I'd give Hamilton a puncher's chance. I hate to say this. I'd basically give Hamilton 0 chance. I don't think that this is going to be a game. I think Trinity is going to score a lot of points, and I don't think Hamilton's going to score many, if any, points against the Trinity defense.
All right. Wesleyan trying to keep up with Trinity will head back to Middletown as they look to bounce back from a rare home loss against Bates. They'll take on a Colby team who's coming off of a hard-fought victory over Bates. I'm sure this is going to be a 4-quarter game. And if you've watched Colby this year, all their games have been very competitive. They played Trinity to a 10-point game, Williams to a 1-score game. They've been right there. They just haven't. Up until last week, they haven't been able to get across the line. So I guess my question for you is, what do you expect? I know who you're going to pick, but how do you expect this game to play out?
You don't know who I'm going to pick. I think who I'm going to pick, but I can't see. I'll start right out by saying I think this is going to be a well-fought game, but I can't see Wesleyan losing 2 games at home to 2 CVV teams. Maybe they'd lose one of them, and they did. They lost to Bates, unfortunately. But I don't see them losing another game to a main team at home. I think that this is a big game for Wes. There's a couple of guys that play for Wes with Colby ties. Defensive coordinator Adam Sheeks is Adam Chicone. Chicone is the coach. Sheeks was, of course, the defensive coordinator at Colby for many years. Nick Donadio, who's one of our safeties, obviously transferred from Colby. So this is an important game for them. And
by the way, when he says one of our safeties, he doesn't literally mean Nick Donadio. He means one of Wesleyan's safeties.
Sorry, there you go. I slipped. I couldn't get through a whole podcast. I think this is going to be a close game, but I feel like Wesleyan, it's an important game for Wesleyan. They've gotten through Hamilton. I think that was a character building game for them. They've usually play very well on the turf. Very good game last week for quarterback Nico Candido. Running game looked good. The offensive line has played well all year, and the defense is and been very good. So I think Colby is going to be challenged to score. I think they will score, but I don't think they're going to put up a lot of points. And it takes a lot of pressure off the Wesleyan offense. I think Wesleyan wins by 7 to 10 points. I think it's going to be a close game. Colby plays tough, obviously. Coach Gosgrove Was a very good coach. He's been around for a long time, was at UMaine for a long time. He's a legend up in Maine. He knows what the heck he's doing, the coaching there. So it's going to be a great game.
I think what's going to be really important when you look at this matchup is, can Wesleyan establish the running game to a point where they're able to dictate the tempo and not go away from the running game, which is, I think, they've come out in a lot of games in their first drive or two. They've run the ball pretty effectively, but in particular against Tufts and against Bates, they struggled running the football in the second half of those games. So that'll be something to really keep an eye on in that one. Speaking of Bates with another night game is they will play Tufts under the lights in Lewiston. It's a Tufts team that has 2 losses. How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, this is do or die for Tufts. Their margin of error is gone. In order for them to have any shot at even a share of the title, they're going to have to win out. It's not that long of a trip for them. They're playing at night. It's going to be probably a little bit chilly. I think that this game will be a ball game. Coach Coyne always has the kiddies playing hard. They've got some really hard-nosed, good players on both sides of the football. They clearly are committed to that running game. They're running the ball really well. They ran the ball really well against Colby last week. I think their defense plays better, but I just think that Tufts has a little bit too much firepower on offense, and I think they win by 7 to 10 points, something in that ballpark.
Yeah, it seems like Tufts found some offensive rhythm against Trinity, and it'll be interesting to see if they can carry that on in this game, or maybe Coach Coyne has another rabbit up his sleeve and he can figure out a way to get another big win for the Bobcats. Then that leads us up to our game of the week. Really, we talk about teams controlling their own destiny. You mentioned that Wesleyan is the only other team besides Trinity that controls their own destiny. Not 100% true, because Middlebury still controls their own destiny due to the fact that co-champions of the NESCAC is a thing. So Middlebury still has Trinity on their schedule. Middlebury's only losses to Wesleyan. Middlebury were to beat Trinity and win the rest of their games, then Middlebury at a worst case scenario would be co-champions in the NESCAC. Middlebury team riding a 3-game winning streak against the Williams team, whose only defeat was to the aforementioned Bantams. And this is a 2 p.m. start time in Vermont. Should be, in my mind, the definition of a pick'em football game.
So first of all, because this is an unofficial NESCAC podcast, we make our own tiebreaker rules.
Okay.
And at least as far as I'm concerned,
Head-to-head match.
you win head-to-head, you win. The defending NESCAC champs, Zander's not going to want to hear this, but the defending NESCAC champs, Middlebury, beat Trinity last year. So in my mind, they should be it. Now, the league, of course, doesn't do it that way. But so anyway, you're correct. Middlebury still does control their own destiny to a certain extent. And actually, so does Williams. This is a NESCAC playoff game in week 5. The winner of this game still has a shot at the NESCAC title. The loser of this game is going to need a lot of help to share the title this year. I think this is going to be a really great game. I'm looking forward to watching part of this game. At the conclusion of the game up in Middletown, we'll have this at the tailgate on the screen. I expect this to be a less than 1 touchdown score game. I've watched both teams play. I've seen Middlebury play in person. Their quarterback's playing a lot better, Brian Moran. They've got some really strong players on defense, particularly on the defensive line. I think that I'm going to go with the home team here, Chris. I think Middlebury wins by less than a touchdown. I think it's going to be a close, hard-fought game, but I still feel that Williams College is a year away. Like Bates, Owen McHugh's doing a great job as a sophomore quarterback for Williams, but I think his junior year and senior year are going to be his years. He's having a great year, but I still think that this entire Williams squad is a year away from really being in the mix in the NESCAC.
It certainly is going to be a very interesting watch on Saturday afternoon, and we're going to know a lot more about both of those teams, because I've been very impressed with the way that Middlebury has responded. Starting with the second half against Bowdoin, they've looked a completely different team than we saw in week 1 against Wesleyan. And Williams continues to impress along the way as well. You can't forget that Williams jumped out to a 14-0 lead over Trinity. That's easier said than done. So obviously the game didn't finish the way they wanted, but you don't just score 14 points against Trinity by accident. We'll certainly keep an eye on that one. All right, Dave, I think the people have heard enough from us this week. The only thing to do is to sit back, crack open a cold one, relax, and watch some NESCAC football on Saturday afternoon. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
Yes, I'm off to my best start ever picking games. So a lot of pressure on me to keep it going. I'm 18-2 so far this year. This is the toughest week, though. There are a couple games that could be really close. So I'm really looking forward to seeing if we can keep it rolling. But it should be a fun week.
We look forward to everyone's thoughts on week number 5, and we'll be back with another episode at this time next week. We hope you've enjoyed another episode of 9 Weeks, Unofficial NESCAC Football Podcast. For Dave Bagatelle, for Mike Whalen, Zander Zebrowski, I'm Chris Grace. Until next time, so long, everybody.